Did Nancy Pelosi start US-China war? On August 2, 2022, Nancy Pelosi, the US Speaker, made a visit to Taiwan. Ever since news of her planned visit broke out, in July 2022, China started making objections, and issued direct threats, to both Taiwan and the United States. China claims Taiwan as a renegade province, and doesn't recognize Taiwan as a country. In a conversation with the US President Joe Biden, on July 28, 2022, the Chinese President Xi Jinping was supposed to have been extremely aggressive, and warned that the US of playing with fire, and it will get burnt. However, the US Speaker Pelosi did visit Taiwan. Her landing was televised, and she even had a TV appearance with the Taiwanese President, Tsai Ing-wen. The US and Taiwan didn't budge under the intense pressure from China. China's warning of a military escalation made the world get anxious about the Chinese reaction. More importantly, the average Chinese citizen wanted to know how their mighty army is going to punish Taiwan and the US. The Chinese media constantly bombards their citizens with communist propaganda, telling how strong their military is, how orderly their communist political system is, and why the US and its allies don't stand a chance to defend Taiwan if China decides to attack. All opposing views are heavily censored and monitored. Foreign news content is extremely restricted. This has created a sense of invincibility in the mind of an average Chinese citizen. Xi Jinping and the Communist Party have the incredible weight of ensuring that this myth is not busted. So, China took military action against Taiwan, choreographed to meet the expectations of their domestic audience, but not force an immediate response from the major powers. China did fire multiple ballistic missiles into the sea off the eastern part of Taiwan. The Chinese military's Eastern Theater Command issued statements that all the missiles hit their targets accurately. However, the drill was conducted after the US Speaker Nancy Pelosi left Taiwan. China sent a signal that it has not initiated a war directly with the United States. China also initiated other measures, as retaliation to the visit of the US Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. These included a. Suspending multiple Taiwanese goods to enter into China, using it as an economic sanction. b. Flying multiple fighter aircrafts, and crossing the central line of the Taiwan Strait. This is viewed as a strong escalation of activities by the Western military analysts. c. Flying a large number of drones near the Kinmen Island group, which is much closer to the Chinese mainland than the main island of Taiwan. d. Increasing the quantum of cyber warfare to a much higher level. It's not entirely clear what China wants to accomplish with these measures, though it did send a message to the nations that defending Taiwan may be much harder than what they may think. However, there is clearly a downside to this. These exercises also gave an insight into what can be expected if China decides to invade Taiwan to the rest of the world. The US, Japan, South Korea, Australia, who may be the first-line nations to enter into Taiwan's defense immediately, may now have time to prepare a defense, or even an offense, to Chinese tactics, well in advance. The other Western nations who may join later to support the US, would have also learnt the attack plan by the Chinese. The US is likely to have picked up crucial data on the offensive capabilities of China, at least the ones that were used in the drill, including the missiles. There are many media analysts who immediately criticized the bad judgment of Nancy Pelosi. They went to chide Biden administration for not stopping Nancy Pelosi from traveling to Taiwan. These critics included appeasers of China, like Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, and the usual China supporters, who appear in the Western media. Apart from them, the usual defenders, from nations like Singapore, who prefer to keep equal distance between US and China, despite whatever international violation China would commit, also criticized Pelosi. But, does it mean Nancy Pelosi's visit was warranted? during this turbulent economic and political times around the globe. Why would a seasoned veteran politician, like Nancy Pelosi, take this unnecessary risk, and create a potential cause for World War III? Nancy Pelosi stated that she undertook this trip to show solidarity with democratic Taiwan. But there were other reasons too. 1. With the Russia-Ukraine war raging still, one of the criticism about the US and the West is, had these nations shown a much more open support to Ukraine before the start of the war, it would have acted as a deterrent, and Russia may not have started the war. So, with regards to Taiwan, the US made a calculated decision. The US President Joe Biden, and his administration, have made many statements that declare openly how the US is bound to support Taiwan if China invades it. The hope is, China will be persuaded not to take such a military operation that has the potential to become World War III. On top of that, the Australian and the Japanese governments have shown clear inclination of supporting Taiwan with troop deployment and other military support. So, the US had to demonstrate their support for Taiwan without any ambiguity, and Pelosi decided to be the envoy who will create the necessary optics. 2. Pelosi is a strong critic of China on the atrocities committed in Xinjiang province, and the concentration camps of the minority population there. She has made several statements on the plight of the Uyghur minority Muslims living in Xinjiang, and how the Chinese government systematically eradicates an entire population. 3. Pelosi has been a supporter of Taiwan for a long time. She is already 82 years old, and her party, namely the Democratic Party, is expected to lose in the midterm elections, in November 2022. If that happens, she'll not continue to be the House Speaker, and may not get another opportunity to showcase her support for Taiwan in the position of a Speaker. This brings up the billion-dollar question. Will China go to war with the US directly, or indirectly, over Taiwan? In other words, did Nancy Pelosi start the US-China war? Well, China has enough reasons not to start a war against Taiwan, especially for a flimsy reason, over a visit by an US official to Taiwan. Let's take a look at those reasons in detail. 1. China is not ready militarily at this time. China has not been in a war since their disastrous loss to Vietnam, in the war started in 1979. China's weaponry is not battle-tested, unlike the Western nations. Most of the Chinese fighters, like J-7, J-16, J-20, etc., and their drones, are based on stolen technology from the US and Russia. The Chinese fighter pilots are not nearly as well trained as what they need to be. The Eastern Command of the Chinese military will need to undergo a large-scale preparation and assessment before engaging in a war with Taiwan. Unless Xi Jinping is completely irrational, China will not invade Taiwan without doing the necessary preparation. 2. China has too many conflicts with everyone, mainly with all its neighbors, and they will take advantage of China being tied up in a Taiwan invasion, and reclaim the territories lost, illegally annexed by Chinese expansionism. It may be ripe for Tibet to become an independent nation again. 3. Chinese military does not stand a chance to withstand the onslaught from the US military and its allies. The US military is much more advanced than the Chinese military by many folds. If the entire military of all the Western nations supporting the US is added in the equation, the asymmetry will be a lot higher. Unfortunately, China has never helped any country with aid or support that it doesn't have any strong alliance partner on its side, except North Korea and Pakistan. 4. Chinese economy will suffer tremendously, both in the near term and in the long term. In the near term, the US and its allies will hurry to find alternative manufacturing hubs, like India, Vietnam, etc., and move their operations over there. In the long term, if these companies believe that there is a simmering conflict between the West and China, they'll be inclined not to operate from China. 5. And finally, China will be facing an adversary beyond what its military and economic might can handle. Though they're likely to put up a strong resistance, China has an extremely high likelihood of losing the war. A military loss for China can be catastrophic, similar to what happened at the end of the Opium Wars, where China lost face completely in the international community. It can also mean the end of the communist control, and may throw China into a long chaos and destruction. On the other hand, China has enough reasons to start a war as well. 1. The CCP and its leaders do believe the world is too dependent on China, and will not want to destroy the supply chain that exists now, and thereby their own economy, in the process. When push comes to shove, China believes that the US and the Western nations will safeguard their economic interests over protecting Taiwan. 2. The 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party is expected to happen in the next few months, and Xi Jinping is likely to win a life term to continue as the president and the head of the military of China. Xi Jinping may be able to assert his authority with a military action, by invading Taiwan. He had constantly expressed his commitment that he'll successfully annex Taiwan, by peace or by force, before his term in office ends. 3. The CCP or the Chinese Communist Party, under Mao, had always shown an eagerness to enter into wars, even when they were militarily handicapped and economically poor. China was barely standing when they entered into the Korean War against the United States, in 1950. China got into a border conflict against the Soviets in 1969, when they were still importing the Soviet military weaponry. Xi Jinping is a strong follower of Mao and his ideology, and it's entirely possible that China may enter into a war, even while facing the odds of a much stronger military opposition alliance, which will include the US, Japan, and the entire Western nations. 4. Currently, China is facing a host of economic troubles, unemployment issues, banking crisis, real estate losses, which are acting as serious problems for the ruling Communist Party. A war can be a great diversion, to create nationalistic jingoism, and make people change focus. In the event of a war, the Chinese authorities will have a perfect opportunity to consolidate their power. China behaves like an adolescent, a hypersensitive nation, that seems to be irked, with a feather's touch. Taiwan, for all practical purposes has not been part of China for more than a century, that is even before the CCP took control of China, in 1949. Taiwan is a democratic country, and has a much different political structure, compared to China. A visit by an US official to Taiwan, that has not been in China's control, for a very long time, is definitely not a justifiable reason, to start a global war. Unless China was waiting for an excuse to invade Taiwan, Nancy Pelosi's visit is not a valid reason to invade, and start a war. So, if the current events lead to a full-fledged war, it may appear Nancy Pelosi triggered World War III. But, it will be absolutely unfair to blame Pelosi's trip for the war. One can only believe that the war would have happened, irrespective of her visit, because China was just waiting to do so. So, we conclude, no, Nancy Pelosi did not start a US-China war. Thanks for watching.